Indonesia, an archipelago comprising thousands of islands spread in the Southeast Asian region, has the record of being one of the leading countries in this part of the world. The country has in the last decade experienced rapid development, which has earned this cluster of islands a place in the global economy, resulting in a position on the list of the Great 20 Nations of the world. April 2015 was a significant time for the Indonesian capital Jakarta, as it hosted hundreds of delegates for the 60th anniversary commemoration for the Asia-Africa Conference. Zambia took part in the events of the 2015 Asia-Africa commemoration with a delegation headed by the Vice President Inonge Wina.
Vice President, welcome. I'm here, welcome. Your host, the Minister of Transport.
Mrs. Wina arrived in the Indonesian capital Jakarta on the 20th of April 2015 at the Soekarno-Hatta International Airport, where she was received by the Indonesian Transport Minister Ignatius Jonan, as well as Zambia's Foreign Affairs Deputy Minister Rayford Mbulu, Commerce Deputy Minister Mau Sampa, and the acting Zambian High Commissioner to Malaysia, Martha Lubemba. Upon arrival, Mrs. Wina drew attention to the significance of the Asia-Africa Conference in the enhancement of relations between the two continents.
But our coming here is very significant in that I was just telling her that my brother-in-law attended the first Badon Conference in 1955 as a freedom fighter. Because that was the period when President Suharto at that time.
President Sukarno.
Sukarno.
Right, our first president.
That's right. He invited all the independent parties, freedom struggle parties in South Africa, in Zambia, in Rhodesia then. We were not independent then. So they attended the first conference, from which they really got a lot of inspiration to gain independence for our countries.
Prior to her participation in the Asia-Africa Conference, Ms. Wina started her tour of duty in Indonesia by conferring with the Indonesian Vice President Yusuf Kala. The two leaders met at the Jakarta Convention Center, which was the host venue for the 2015 Asia-Africa Conference commemorations. The Zambian Vice President was accompanied to the meeting by Foreign Affairs Deputy Minister Rayford Mbulu, Commerce Deputy Minister Mau Sampa, Acting Zambian High Commissioner to Malaysia accredited to Indonesia Martha Lubemba, as well as our Senior Private Secretary Sheila Suwaila, and officials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Finance. The two leaders had discussions for 30 minutes. After the talks, a momentous partnership in the aquaculture industry was struck.
We touched on some economic issues in the area of agriculture and research, aquaculture, and the need to train more Zambians, or to allow Zambians space to train in Indonesia in the various sectors of the economy. We want to promote aquaculture in Zambia. And the Indonesian Vice President has agreed to accept Zambian students to come to Indonesia to train in aquaculture.
The discussions also tackled a twinning deal between Zambia's Livingstone City and the exotic Indonesian island of Bali.
We would like to see Bali work with Livingstone so that the two cities can be twinned. And Livingstone will learn a lot from the experiences of this island of Bali and promote tourism in that region.
Forestry was another topic of discussion.
We were very, very encouraged by the Vice President's remarks on the issues of timber, in that Indonesia is no longer exporting logs to other countries, but finished products from the timber industry. So this is something that Zambia can emulate to stop the rampant destruction of our forest resources.
Indonesia tanah air beta, bineka tunggal ika, ku bangga, ku cinta Indonesia.
On Wednesday, the 22nd of April 2015, the Leaders' Summit for the Asia-Africa Conference was set to commence. Mrs. Wina, the Zambian delegation leader, joined other heads of state and government in the opening ceremony for the conference at the Jakarta Convention Center, whose representation reached 92 countries. Vice President Wina arrived at the conference venue at 08:45 hours local time. Mrs. Wina was welcomed at the event by the host president, Joko Widodo, who personally welcomed his high-ranking visitors at the JCC. Ms. Wina later joined other leaders for a photo session before progressing into the day's activities. Traditional Indonesian music ushered the leaders into the opening ceremony. When opening the conference, President Joko Widodo called for reforms in the United Nations for it to function effectively and further deal with the prevailing injustice, inequalities, and violence affecting the entire world. He also urged the leaders to formulate a new global economic order away from dependence on global financial institutions.
The mandate of the United Nations have ignored the existence of the world organization that we have. Therefore, we, as Asian African nations, urged the reform of the United Nations.
African countries were represented by Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe, who is also the African Union chairperson. In his opening remarks, President Mugabe called for enhanced economic cooperation between Asian and African countries.
Mr. Chairman, the countries of our two regions have awakened to the fact that we should no longer be consigned to the role of exporters of primary goods and importers of finished goods, a role that had historically been assigned to us by the colonial powers, and starting from the days of colonialism. In Asia, you have made much more remarkable progress in transforming your economies to become producers of manufactured and processed goods than we have in Africa. That wave of economic transformation anchored on adding value to and beneficiating our divinely endowed natural resources is also sweeping across Africa, taking root in many countries.
Participating leaders at the 60th Asia-Africa Summit made presentations on their country positions on matters pertaining to social and economic development affecting the entire world. For Zambia's Vice President, her presentation equally looked at the need for reforms in the United Nations, but her emphasis bordered on fair representation of African countries in the UN Security Council.
Changing global economic and political environment calls for drastic reforms of the international financial architecture and the United Nations system. We are of a firm belief that the reform of the UN and its structures is crucial in ensuring fair representation, accountability, transparency, and its effectiveness. We therefore continue to urge all our cooperating partners, including those in Asia, to support the common African position for greater African representation in the United Nations system.
In her address, Mrs. Wina also urged the Asian countries to come to the aid of Africa in improving agriculture productivity.
It is our belief that the agricultural sector can play a pivotal role in accelerating economic growth in our regions. Considering that it has a shorter gestation period, we must therefore continue to support and pay special attention to the sector as it guarantees food security and poverty reduction. We, in this regard, call on the support from our colleagues in Asia to help Africa to address some of these challenges. This support could be in form of technology transfer, enhanced plant and animal production, agricultural research, facilitation of agricultural trade, as well as climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies.
On the global economy, Mrs. Wina said the private sector need to be embraced in the development of businesses between the two continents. She stressed that peace and security are a prerequisite in ascertaining sustainable development. And empowerment of women is a subject dear to Mrs. Wina. She utilized the opportunity of addressing the global leaders to challenge them on the need to critically look into the empowerment of women.
My country recognizes the role women play as key contributors to the economies of our individual countries. There is need, therefore, for this forum to come up with interventions that focus on integrating women's empowerment in the South-South cooperation strategies.
I want to thank the Vice President of Zambia for her statement.
On the same day, Vice President Inonge Wina held bilateral talks with her Egyptian counterpart Ibrahim Mahlab on the sidelines of the Leaders' Summit. The discussions established that Egypt is an important market for Zambia and has been a good export destination, but there's need for trade relations to graduate to increased investment for Zambians.
We discussed issues about our commitments to COMESA, but apart from that, we highlighted the issue of investments in Zambia. We have realized that with Egypt there's more trading than really investments, and we would like to see more investors from Egypt investing in our various sectors in the country.
Mrs. Wina said the meeting tackled the empowerment subject with the aim of supporting additional entrepreneurship programs for women in Zambia.
The areas of women's empowerment, especially the entrepreneurship promotion among women. And this again will be looked at as we interact with the Egyptians in promoting women's enterprises.
So do we see some of these things being immediately implemented within the course of the year?
Yes, I think there's no reason why we cannot implement some of these decisions being taken here. That's why we are here, so that when we go back, we make a follow-up on the deliberations, we make a follow-up on the this one-to-one interactions we have had, so that we make concrete follow-ups and we ensure that some of the agreements made will be implemented by the various ministries concerned.
She also noted that health was a key talking point during the talks. This was because the number of medical lecturers at Zambian medical facilities has reduced.
As you know, some of the doctors we have had as teachers or lecturers at the medical school are from Egypt. But of course the number is less now. But the Vice President of Egypt has promised to send a delegation to Zambia from the health sector, which will discuss matters with our own Minister of Health.
After the day's deliberations, the Zambian Vice President later joined other leaders at a state dinner held at the Presidential Palace within the capital, Jakarta. President Joko Widodo and his wife Iriana welcomed Mrs. Wina and other leaders at the gala dinner, which was preceded by an army parade. The 60th anniversary of the Asia-Africa Summit Leaders Meeting progressed into the second day with more presentations on the needs of Asian and African states by the leaders who took part. Vice President Wina did not leave anything to chance as she sought more deals in the interest of the Zambian people through bilateral talks with various representatives and leaders. This time around, she held discussions with Angola's Vice President Manuel Domingos Vincent at the Grand Hyatt Hotel in the heart of Jakarta. Border security was a priority for the two leaders, who exchanged ideas on easing the movement of the citizenry from one country to another. Mrs. Wina shared the highlights of the meeting with her Angolan counterpart.
We emphasized on the need for intensive trading between the two countries, and that we should improve our infrastructure at the borders in terms of buildings and for security purposes, and also to ensure that our people are provided with, are facilitated to be able to move from one part of Angola into Zambia and vice versa. We share a very long common border which we need to secure, and this was also an area of discussion. Recently, our president was, President Lungu, was in Angola to witness the rehabilitation and the commemoration of the Lobito Bay, of the Benguela Railway. And we want to see how we can utilize that railway line from the Zambian side to transport people and the goods to Lobito from Angola, especially from the Copper Belt part.
In the evening of Thursday, the 23rd of April 2015, the Asia-Africa Leaders Summit came to a close, and the host president Joko Widodo, with his co-chair, President Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe, shared the resolutions of the leaders' gathering.
Our success is also measured by the spirited deliberations in all the sessions of our summit. There is no doubt, therefore, that this summit will be as historic and as epochal as the one that gave birth to the Bandung spirit in this very country in 1955.
We have successfully adopted 3 important outcome documents, namely the Bandung Message. Second, the Declaration on Reinvigorating the New Asian-African Strategic Partnership. And third, the Declaration on Palestine.
But this did not mark the end of the 2015 Asia-Africa Summit activities. On Friday, the 24th of April, the leaders who attended the conference made a historical visit to the place where the idea of the Asia-Africa collaboration was formed. This is Bandung, a city in West Java province located 153 kilometers from Jakarta. During the leaders' meeting, the relatively small city was closed to any other activities and gave prominence to the events of the day. It was here 60 years ago, Indonesian First President Kusnezaro Sukarno, in collaboration with his Asian counterparts, hosted their African compatriots for the first Asia-Africa Conference. At that time, the major needs of the 2 continents were political independence. 60 years later, their descendants and current leaders in Asia and Africa traced back the steps of their forefathers in reinvigorating partnership of the 2 continents by visiting the birthplace of their partnership. Indonesian President Joko Widodo led the leaders, who included Zambia's Vice President Inonge Wina, in a historical walk along the Jalan Asia-Africa Street, where the Gedung Merdeka, also known as Freedom House, is situated. The Merdeka is where the leaders converged in 1955. Interestingly, the building is intact, with the smallest details such as the chairs still available for use. The site has been turned into a museum. The colorful commemoration ceremony also included a march past and cultural display by the host nation.
Welcome to Bandung. Halo, halo Bandung.
In his Bandung address, Indonesian President Joko Widodo observed that the 10-point 1955 declaration made by the leaders in 1955 still caters for the needs of the current generation.
60 years ago, in this room, presented our great leaders who inspired the world. In this room, the spirit of the initiators, the great leaders Sukarno, our founding fathers, Bung Karno, will still roar. In this room, the spirit of the struggle of our great leaders, Jawaharlal Nehru, is still ignited.
And African Union Chairperson Robert Mugabe called on Africa to take its place in the global economy.
The past 30 years, trade flows between our two regions have increased rapidly, but in a highly imbalanced way. In 2013, for example, Asia accounted for 26% of Africa's trade flows, whereas Africa accounted for a mere 3% of Asia's flows. One of the major factors accounting for this skewed trade imbalance is that Africa-Asia trade patterns have replicated those between Africa and the developed countries.
For Zambia, the visit to Bandung evokes memories.
It really invokes feelings of the struggle that was there before Zambia gained her independence. And for some of us who heard the stories of Bandung when we were growing up, it's quite an experience of a lifetime to have been part of this commemoration. And I think it's something that will leave the Bandung spirit will live as long as humanity is on earth.
The activities in Bandung marked a symbolic closure of the 60th anniversary events of the Asia-Africa commemorations. A few hours after returning to the capital, Jakarta, it was time for the Zambian Vice President to head back home. For Mrs. Wina, her visit to Indonesia was worth the long trek.
Today was the last day of the Asian African Summit, and the theme for this particular summit was very, very appropriate because it was looking at strengthening South-to-South cooperation and also promoting prosperity and peace in the region. Not only that, but it looked also at the new Asian-African partnerships, strategic partnership, to see how we can concretize all these agreements that we make for ourselves in the region.
While you're here, you had several bilateral meetings. What should the Zambian people expect out of these interactions you had?
As I indicated earlier, I hope that we'll make concrete follow-ups on all the issues that we discussed with other leaders from other regions. For example, our discussions with the Angolans, with the Angolan Vice President, were mainly targeting the issues of strengthening border facilities so that our people and the people from Angola are able to do border trade between the two countries. My discussions with the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, for example, I look forward to concretizing the issue of empowering women through grants, or rather through the provision of loans to women's groups. This way we realize that I think it's more sustainable. It's a sustainable way of empowering women than the usual grants that we offer at the moment. We discussed some issues with the Egyptian Prime Minister, and all these need to be followed up so that some of the issues discussed pertaining to technology transfer can be concretized. The discussions with the Indonesian Vice President, the issues of agricultural research and training of students in Indonesia, and many other issues of interest and importance to Zambia. We just need to follow them up.
Strengthening South-to-South cooperation for the promotion of world peace and prosperity was the theme for the 2015 Asia-Africa Summit. This was an accomplished theme for Zambia, looking at achievements resulting from the interactions in both Jakarta and Bandung, where the agenda propagating a better future for both Asia and Africa was a priority.